What's going on, guys? Sorry I'm a little late with the stream. I got distracted with some work stuff. Got a little busy with that. Wasn't paying attention. Next thing I knew, I looked at the clock and I was 2 minutes late. Whoopsie daisy, but I assume that's fine. So thanks for joining me. We are going to be talking about another one of the comics I pulled this week. This time, Empyre X-Men #1. For those of you that didn't read the title or see it on the other side of the screen a second ago, but. So I expected a pretty standard tie-in. Just that's what we've kind of gotten out of Empyre so far. The Fantastic Four one was pretty straightforward. It has some fun ideas, but it was a very Dan Slott-heavy book, so I wasn't that into it personally. And then the other one we did was Hulkling, which was good, but very standard in terms of what a tie-in does in a sort of crossover event like this. So I came into Empyre X-Men #1 thinking, oh, okay, I'm just going to get the same old inconsequential thing. I was wrong. This story is written by Alan Hickman, which should have probably been my first clue. But I was not expecting what I got, to say the least. Hold on, I'm just getting to the credits page, which is like halfway into the book because the intro is so long. And Tinny Howard co-wrote it. They did an excellent job. Matteo Buffonghi did the art. Nolan Woodard did the coloring. Clayton Cowles did lettering. Tom Muller design, whatever that means. I don't even know. I don't know. But regardless, let's start with the. Okay, let's go through what this comic does first. Sorry, I got a lot to talk about. It's got a cool intro. We begin on the Sanctum Sanctorum a year ago. I actually had to pause for a second and be like, wait. This is the X-Men tie-in to Empyre, right? What are we doing here? I'm going to just read Doctor Strange's little speech. I think it's really interesting and worth dwelling on for a minute. I believe what you're asking is simply not possible. I know what you're thinking. With my powers, I willed something to be, and so surely the power to reverse that must exist. It must. I need it to. You might say, Stephen, what about atemporality and the fallacy of cause and effect? Can't we, as the righteous protagonists of reality that we are, not simply erase this act from ever occurring? It's a fair question, certainly one to ponder, and here's why I think it's unlikely. Your powers over reality make you a touchstone of the reality in which they exist, and the existence of those powers, and you yourself act in eternal opposition of the erasure of them. Simply put, we have seen what comes from playing you. We have seen what comes from playing with you as you play God. No? You erase a million mutants from existence, and now you're asking me to unring that bell. Well, I cannot, and I believe you cannot either, for to deny the existence of what you have done, to erase yourself from your own history, is not possible. So allow me to offer you this advice, Wanda Maximoff. You need to finally embrace your sin. Let it consume you. Then ring a bigger bell. So that's how this book opens. And that's quite our introduction to basically Scarlet Witch's role in House of X, which has been pretty quiet up until now. We haven't really seen her. As far as I know, I haven't really encountered her on any of the X-Men books. I'm not caught up on all of them, so I could be wrong on that. We haven't talked a lot about her role in Decimation and whether she's even welcome in Krakoa, and whether Xavier and everyone else even bothered with her. But regardless, next we go to 9 months ago in the past. So we're cutting from the year ago, moving forward 9 months ago, to Wanda showing up in Genosha, and we start flashing back 7 months ago, 6 months ago, 5 months ago, 4 months ago, 3 months ago, 1 month ago, until after much research and traveling and finding some crazy staff, Wanda returns to Genosha and slams the staff into the ground and says, "Mutants of Genosha, live!" Basically in an attempt to revive the whole wiped out country in a sort of act of redemption against what she did way back in the day of House of M. Hello, M. Oralis. Welcome to the stream. So that's and we're not even done our intro yet, but that's the cold open, I guess, or whatever, of this book. these figures come across Wanda and they talk about whether or not she's okay. And Wanda just goes, no! And then we cut to the present day. And there's this cool little map shot that frames on Wakanda and Genosha, the two main areas of concern in this story. Oh, thanks, Morales, we'll say. um, so, Katati invasion fleet lands at the staging area for a Wakanda strike. The plant people that pour out, it's all been established well at this point. If you've seen Empyre, our review of Empyre #2, or have read the books yourself. But they're basically using Genosha as a staging ground for Wakanda. The Katati talk a little bit about Wakanda and like its vibranium and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting hearing their perspective of it. And also, this is the first time in any of these Empyre books that we've gotten a real taste of what the Katati are like as soldiers and working together like this beyond Koi and stuff. And they're pretty interesting. They've got a lot of humanity to them, at least based on what Howard and Hickman wrote. Then they say they chased off some locals and they kept one as a prisoner, and it's this weird zombie, and they're like, his jaw fell off. And they sort of reattach it for him. Oh, on that page, actually. And the zombie is able to talk, and it says that it's a mutant, and it also says that they've landed on like the worst place to stage an invasion as aliens, because it talks about how millions of them died there and they all have powers. And he says, my name is Exploding Boy and I blow stuff up. And he just explodes around these aliens and they strike out at him, but he's a zombie and he's fine. And just a horde of them shows up because millions of mutants died on Genosha, so that would create millions of mutant zombies. This was actually established in a previous story before called Necrosha, which does dampen the excitement of all of that to a degree, but obviously that has crazy implications for Genosha and all that stuff. And then we get to the intro page, literally almost halfway through the entire book. So it's quite the story to start off with. We then go to the X-Core, which is kind of the centerpiece of the story, consisting of Magic, Penance, and Angel, at least of what we see. Magic's basically acknowledging that she's here to spy on them and like on behalf of Xavier, and Angel gets really upset at that, and she's like, well, if you don't like it, we can take a portal right back to Krakoa and you can complain about it. And they do exactly that. They go to Krakoa, where Black Tom Cassidy is throwing a fit. He's talking about how one of the portals isn't working right, and it's on Genosha. So Xavier says they will go and look into that. Not a lot of word about how the Kotati portals are similar, if not identical, to the X-Men portals yet, but there does seem to be some sort of connection going on here. Does this happen yet? Xavier, yeah, in a really cool scene, Xavier then explains to Angel that Magic was left there not so much to spy on Angel and Penance, but just to make sure they weren't wasting their time. And he talks about how he has limited manpower. They can only resurrect so many mutants at once. And that they did, like, if X-Core isn't being, like, benefiting the mutant race enough, then he would just redirect them. And Xavier says some very nice things about how confident he is in Angel's abilities. At which point, they all get dispatched to head off into, Genosha, and figure out what's going on. They go with Jamie Maddox, and I don't know. I'm just looking at this page where Magneto... Oh, I see. Yeah, so they take just Jamie Maddox. That's the whole thing with Magneto. So they're not allowed to take like a full force of mutants just because they're very short on manpower, and that's like a recurring thing in this, which is whatever. They show up, and sure enough, they find the Katati being chased down by a horde of zombies, and Magic and Penance proceed to just slaughter everyone in sight, which was great. Jamie then just goes to start repairing the portal, while Angel and the other two hold everyone off. They manage to fix the portal, and a tidal wave of slime comes out of it, and the old ladies from one of the X-Men books from the core series shows up at the end, and they are there to come basically like they say they're called the horticulture. They're established in one of the early X-Men books, and they say they're here because they know plants, and that's the end of the first story. So that's a lot in a book. It's especially a lot in a tie-in. I can't imagine if someone like hasn't been reading House of X and isn't caught up on some of these things would think of this, because there's so much going on in this book. But it's great. It's got a cool cast. I'm always happy to see Magic doing stuff. Angel's well used here, and Penance is a neat character. Like, I know Monet from some random story in the past. It's interesting that Genosha has been once again resurrected into a nation of zombies. I alluded to that when I was kind of going through what happens in the comic earlier, and that was surprising because we have, like, I don't know, it's the exact repeat of the Necrosha storyline where they all get resurrected, but it is kind of under different circumstances, and it feels like a very different story anyways. And meanwhile, there's all this Empyre stuff going on. I was surprised at how little it had to do with Empyre and how much it had to do with the X-Men, and how important this is going to be for the X-Men story, because we learned a lot in this book, especially in that introduction, which is just awesome. We get a sense of where Scarlet Witch has been all this time and what she's been up to, how like she's been dealing with decimation and trying to like redeem herself was interesting, because that also conflicts unknowingly, I assume, with what the X-Men are doing. Her actions are fruitless, and if anything might interfere with the mutant race's collective plan to basically resurrect Genosha right now, and that's fascinating. I don't know where that's going or what the plan is, but I am very curious to see how it goes. Kind of interesting that the mutants seem to have retained their intelligence in all of this, even though they're undead. I have a feeling Scarlet Witch is fine, and either they're a prisoner or just living with them or in some weird situation. And I don't know, it's all quite fascinating. I'm very curious to see where we go from here, and I'm pretty sold on this tie-in. I want to see what happens next, and it all fits in with the House of X stuff, which is cool, and is likely going to be sticking with it for a while. That's fascinating. It's better than some of those X-Men books. Like, we reviewed Giant Size Magneto, and that book felt inconsequential. This stuff was valuable setup, and kind of gets into what I was talking about with the core X-Men series in another stream way before, where like I was saying that X-Men series doesn't have a lot to it, and it's kind of confusing because it just kind of goes from one idea to the next, but it feels like it's setting up stuff that gets explored in other series and brought up in them. And the horticulture, a bunch of old women botanists who got put out of business by Krakoa, out for revenge and to mess around with the gates, which they can freely use. They're interesting characters, and it's cool to see them back. I was delighted to turn that final page and see that, followed by the caption. There's just this page-long thing that just says, alien plants versus mutant zombies versus old ladies. Hickman and Howard are clearly having fun with this thing. It's almost got like Age of Ultron versus Marvel Zombies energy to it. And I think I bring up that comparison, I feel, appropriately. It could very well just be a sort of story in terms of like having a lot of depth to it, but if we can have fun along the way and promise this actual action in a way that to be fair, Age of Ultron versus Marvel Zombies didn't, that would be great for this story. If we can actually get some fun with plant people fighting zombies and them all dealing with the crazy botanist woman, that would be wonderful. I am all for that. So I would recommend this book. If you wrote this off as just a typical tie-in, it wasn't. And I was really surprised and impressed by it, and think you would be too. So that's pretty much my review. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll be back. I don't really think I am going to have enough time. I can say that definitively. I'm not going to have enough time for another stream today. I worked a very long day today, so that's why we just kind of put this thing in last minute. But we will be back tomorrow with the only DC book I ended up pulling this week, actually. They've been comparatively light recently, it feels like, in comparison to Marvel, which has just unleashed the floodgates. We're going to be talking about that Batman comic depicting the first part of the Joker War. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time here on Comic Island. Well...